Fans for Life podcast. I am Landon Thomas. I am joined by my co-host Shahnavaz Makhani. We have an episode where we are going to cover the Tim Hardaway Jr. and Jason Kidd dynamic on what his role is for this team. And then also, where do the Mavs finish in the Western Conference? That could be all over the place. Shahnavaz, first of all, before we even get into the topics here, we have a preseason game tonight. It's supposed to be the dress rehearsal, but it won't be. Luka Doncic won't play, and then also Jaden Hardy is doubtful. Jason Kidd said Josh Green was a full participant in practice. Josh said he's feeling good, but what's your overall expectation, and what would you like to see tonight in the preseason game?
Yeah, I want to see Josh Green's aggressiveness. I know he's coming off an injury, but I think, if he's going to vie for that starting spot, I know it's still kind of up in the air. Every time we hear Jason Kidd talk, it's okay. We've got, obviously the three starters in Luka, Kyrie, and Grant Williams, but the other two spots are up for grabs. It seems like still, and so I think we're looking at it coming down to Josh Green or even potentially Derrick Jones Jr. And so I want to see Josh Green if he wants that starting gig, which I think he I wouldn't see why he doesn't. I want to see him go all out tonight. I want to see him really be aggressive, really take control and do the little things that he's so good at and really put his stamp on this game and solidify that starting spot.
Yeah, it's very interesting how we don't have a starting lineup this close to the season. But, with the injuries and the overseas trip, it's hard to really see who gels with who. And Jason Kidd pretty much said it. You just reiterated it that, there are three starters. And you have to feel good for Grant Williams because, he's always one of those solidified starting spots. Last year his role was all over the place, starting off the bench and some, not playing much. But it's going to be really interesting that you said that with Josh Green, because this is his time to showcase. Good thing that his back is good, because this is really his showcase moment to grab that starting lineup. He's really competing with Derrick Jones Jr., as you just said, and it's very interesting who will show out tonight, and specifically Josh in particular, his ball handling and just his will to be aggressive, like you mentioned. That's going to be very interesting because Derrick Jones Jr., what you're going to get: solid defense and athleticism, pushing the pace where you want to, play at a faster pace. But I think Josh Green's shooting ability will help him get that role just to start the season at least. But it's going to be interesting to see those two battle it out.
Yeah, and from the Mavericks perspective, it's it's a contract year for Josh Green, so you've really got to make a decision on are we going to extend him? Thankfully, he's a restricted free agent, so you don't have to worry about a Jalen Brunson situation here. You can match whatever offer he does get in the offseason if it's from another team. But even looking at it from the other angle, it's kind of like, is he, if the Mavericks decide to move on or not to match an offer, if they know that, hey, we're going to go in a different direction just because, whatever the case may be, we haven't seen the development we want, or, kids, Jason Kidd's, his whatever incessant need of playing veterans over young players, is this a situation where you look to package him in a deal, right? So the Mavericks really need to get some clarity on kind of what his role is going to be going forward. And from a team perspective, it's going to shape, what this team does closer to the trade deadline.
So I want to play a game real quick, and I'm putting you on the spot. We haven't talked about this.
Let's do it.
So this is Shark Tank, with next off season. And obviously we'll talk about it throughout the year, but Josh Green and his agent walks in that door. Before you even get to free agency, what would you pay Josh Green, and what would the contract length in terms of years be?
I mean, if we're going just based on what we've seen so far,
Yeah,
You know,
what you
over
seen
the
so far?
I could see, 3 for 50, right? 3 for 45, 3 for 50. I mean, something along those lines. I think
Yeah.
that's kind of it's a middle of the road deal. You're not over. I don't think you're overpaying. He's still young, right? I mean, he's got obviously the athleticism, the defense is there. The question is going to be, what does this season look like, right? Can he really take advantage of the opportunity that's in front of him? If
Yeah.
that's the case, let's assume that he has a season that I thought he would have had last year had he,
Mhm.
had Kid not kind of messed around with him in the lineup, out of the lineup, things like that. 4 for 80. I mean, I think is kind of a good place. That's probably a starting point. I think if the season goes, if all goes well, um, he's not going to get Desmond Bain money. He's not going to, he's not going to get one of these like near max deals, obviously. But I think a middle of the road deal for your fourth starter is not a bad, not a bad piece going forward.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting what he ultimately does get. And you said a key factor into that is restricted free agency. So
Thank
I'm not
God.
I know just based on that is like you said, you can match. So whatever teams present that offer, you have the ability to match it. But I'm also very curious on what, outside of Dallas, what other teams value Josh
Mhm.
Green. Because we're so inside this DFW bubble on what we all think of Josh Green, but I'm very curious on what what scouts, what GMs, what owners, and just what other players uh, think about Josh Green. So that's definitely one thing to look at. And then the next thing is just everyone stay healthy.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's
you just want to see just one complete game without an injury or
mhm.
without any hiccups, so we can get to the we can get to that season opener against the Spurs on the road, at full strength at least, hopefully with Luka Doncic and Jaden Hardy coming back, but you want a full roster as much as you can. And I also want to see Dante Exum as well, because that's someone who I really think is going to get a lot of minutes,
Mhm.
and he can be that hybrid as well. We'll talk about hybrid when we talk about
Yep.
THJ, but but I want to see him in person, and that's going to be exciting to see as well. So,
Yeah,
uh,
I agree. I think Exum's kind of carved out a role. I think we've heard that.
the comeback, he's
Yeah,
back in the league.
he's back. I
One
think
last shot, right?
this is it, right? I mean, he's got to make this count. I think everything we've heard out of from Jason Kidd and from the Mavericks, and even you can kind of tell, um, during preseason games and practice that he's definitely got a role going forward. Now the concern there is that going to be at the expense of Jaden Hardy, who it seems is
Yeah.
kind of I don't want to say falling out of favor, but I think we haven't really, he's been injured obviously this preseason, so we haven't really seen much from him.
Mhm.
I'm kind of curious what the rotation is going to look like, come Wednesday against San Antonio, because I know Mavs fans and you and I both alike are huge Jaden Hardy fans. I mean, we love his game, we love seeing him play, but is this going to be another situation where Dante Exum's going to take minutes over him, Seth Curry's going to take minutes over him, and are you
Yeah.
stunting the development of a guy who for argument's sake should have been a first round pick a couple of years ago?
Yeah. It's TBD, it's fluid. So we'll see how the season progresses for him. Hopefully he has a great season and takes advantage of his opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
That's really all I can say until he gets on the court and see what Jason Kidd's rotations are going to be, because we honestly don't know, and we probably won't know for the first few games of the season because the team hasn't been together. So
Right.
okay, so the first topic, I posted this yesterday, just a just a video of Jason Kidd's comments and THJ's comments from media day to practice a few days ago, and it's on our YouTube page. So make sure y'all look at that. And actually, let me just post it right here, and then Shahnavaz, I'll get your thoughts. So Let me roll the clip. Then I'll put it in there, and then
Awesome.
all right, you ready?
Yep, let's do it.
Okay, so Shahnavaz, that's awkward. Did you just feel that? Just watching that
Yeah.
video? Does that give you Christian Wood vibes, or is that just, or are we
Oh,
just overhyping it? What's your first thoughts just listening to that?
so I don't think it doesn't give me Christian Wood vibes from the sense of, you know, I think there was always kind of a mutual dislike between Jason Kidd and Christian Wood.
Yeah,
You know, and I think we've heard a lot about it. His comments and Jason Kidd's comments alike. I think this is a little bit more. Tim Hardaway's played in this league a long time, right? He's a veteran. He's been on multiple teams. I think this goes back to the issue that we talked about, in our first episode, and we touched on it a lot last year. But it's Jason Kidd's communication style and the way he talks to his players, and I just don't get it. Like if Tim Hardaway's going to be hybrid, which he's been the majority of his career, like it's not anything new. It's not like you're telling LeBron that he's going to be coming off the bench and it's like a whole new kind of, Tim Hardaway's come off the bench.
transition,
He started.
yeah.
He's done this his entire career for a number of teams. So I think from Hardaway's perspective, it's like, just tell me what you want from me, right? Like, do you want me to be a sixth man? Okay, I will. Am I going to be a guy who's going to start 15, 20 games this year? Okay, great. Then, I know what my job is. And I think we also know that the lineups are going to be fluid. Like Mavs fans, we're not, we weren't dumb. Like we know, like lineups are going to change throughout the season. This isn't, especially when you bring in this many new pieces, like things are going to be fluid the first, couple of months of the season, right? We always, I always talk about this, that, I wait till December really to make kind of a judgment on how the season's going for different teams, right? Because it takes time to get lineups right. It takes time to get, players kind of acclimated to their new teammates and things like that. But Hardaway's been on this team for a long time. He's had this role. I get it from his perspective. Like if I'm, if I'm a veteran in this league and I've been on this team for this long, like, and I've done this job before as a hybrid player, just tell me that's what you want from me. Like, and that way I know. And it's like, there's no communication between Jason Kidd as the head coach and Tim Hardaway Jr. And that is what makes it, super awkward. When you watch this clip, it's like, and you can tell his kind of facial expressions at the end. That last clip from a couple days ago was like, I mean, I think he just seems defeated. Like everyone's talking about this, but nobody's giving him a straight answer.
Yeah, it's definitely awkward, and like you said, just talk to him. I mean,
I don't get it.
mind-boggling to me that after all these weeks you haven't had a one-on-one conversation with him about his role. Like you said, if it's going to be off the bench and shooting or thriving for a six-man role, just tell him. Or if it's going to be a hybrid, which he's expecting. I mean, he says it every time the topic comes up, like you said, with him, then tell him, hey, you're going to be a hybrid for us like you were last year, and just be ready for all opportunities. I mean, and then it's just very awkward. It's very shocking that they haven't had a one-on-one about it. I mean, or if you're on Jason Kidd's side of it and you just don't know yet, then you
just
can
say it.
That too. Just say it.
And look, I think I like the idea of him coming off the bench, right? I don't think he fits with the starting lineup, especially when you kind of need more defense with Luka and Kyrie.
Yeah.
But this is a young second unit for all intents and purposes, right? If you're saying, Hardy's going to get minutes, Exum, who's been out of the league for a while, is going to get minutes off the bench. You need a veteran presence like Tim Hardaway Jr. to kind of come in and kind of kickstart that group, right? And so I think that's a really good role. And Landon, we talked about this last episode and the episode before, right? Like some days your lineups are going to be different. Like Derek Lively's not going to start every matchup, right? If he's going against Jokic, like who's to say Maxi Kleber doesn't start those games, right? Just as like a guy who can defend the perimeter a little bit better than probably Rashawn Holmes can or Derek Lively can. Like some nights Rashawn Holmes is going to start. Some nights I'm sure, unfortunately, Dwight Powell is going to start. Like it's just the way that the basketball goes. Like things are going to be fluid, and very rarely do you have a set 5-man lineup unless you're a top level championship contending team that has had that core together for a long time. So
Yeah.
I think he's going to start some games, and I totally get it from his side. And I just don't understand these communication like issues that Jason Kidd seems to have every year, and the season hasn't even started yet, and here we are talking about another like mishap that he's having.
Yeah, and I agree with THJ, honestly. I mean, when you look at just the numbers and what he did after the Kyrie trade. So let's talk about that. So uh in the 14 games he played with Luka and Kyrie, I know it's not a big sample size, but that is what it is. He averaged 17 points a game, 3 rebounds, 2 assists. He shot 52% from the field, and he shot 54% from the 3-point range. So when you look at how he played after the Kyrie trade, and then you go into a off season where he's healthy and he has 4 months
Mhm.
to prepare, 3 4 months to prepare for this season, and you just had an incredible run, even though the team failed miserably, but you had an incredible run with the 2 stars of the team, and you get 2 defensive players, Grant Williams and Derek Lively. And who knows who's going to start at center? It's fluid, like we just talked about.
Yep.
But you get 2 defensive players, so you're thinking, okay, we got some more defense in the lineup, and I played great. I balled
Mhm.
out. I'm a flamethrower.
He was
So
great.
then, yeah, he was. So then you come into the season expecting to start or be at least a hybrid, and then your coach is talking about 6 man of the year. So I kind of get what he's saying on his side, but the team needs defense. I mean, the team
Yeah.
was horrible in defense. I mean, when you look at the numbers, they had a 118.6. Well, that was THJ just himself had a 118.6 defensive rating, and the team I think had a 116, and that's 25th in the league. And then there were 29th in steals, 30th in rebounds. They were 23rd in opponent second chance points. I mean, the defense was horrid,
Just
but
awful. Yeah.
at the same time, you know, if you just have that one-on-one conversation with him, so he knows headed in to the season, I think he will be more comfortable, or at least what we just saw in that those 2 videos. He'll be more comfortable in answering questions about his role. Like, oh yeah, J Kid and I had a conversation. I'm gonna be a hybrid this year, or J Kid and I had a conversation. I'm gonna be off the bench this year, but when I play, I'm gonna make sure that I ball out, and I'm gonna make sure that my shot is always there, like you saw last season. You gotta. I think you would see a more confident THJ in his responses. So
Yeah, and it's not like he's never been a 6-man before. Like,
yeah,
I get the, if it's an uncomfortable conversation with a guy that's been starting, it's like what's going on in Golden State, right? Like the question is like,
Chris
is Chris
Paul.
Paul going to be your 6th man, right? Like that. Okay, understandably, that's an awkward conversation for Steve Kerr, right? Because Chris Paul's been a starter his entire career,
Yep.
and I'm sure he's expecting to start, but if you're Golden State, like your optimal lineup is going to be, Chris Paul coming off the bench and keeping, Wiggins and Draymond and Kevon Looney in the starting lineup with
And like
Clay
you
and
said,
Steph.
the young players,
Yeah,
Kaminga and Moody and all those,
they
that
need a
rookie,
veteran guy
that
off the
first
bench.
round
Like
pick. Yeah.
that's a huge addition for them, right? So,
Yeah.
with a guy like that, like sure, it's an awkward conversation, but with Tim Hardaway, like he's done this before. That's the thing that's so confusing to me is I don't understand why Kid just can't say yes, you're coming off the bench. And to be honest, like the way that the rotations go when ideally one of Luka and Kyrie is always on the floor, you need a guy like Tim Hardaway to kind of play off that when, one of them is off, right? If Luka's on the
Yeah.
bench and Kyrie's running point, you surround him with guys like Seth Curry and Tim Hardaway Jr. and Grant Williams. Like you've got like great shooting around it, so Kyrie can just drive and kick, or you've
Yeah.
got ball handling. Like Hardaway, for all of his faults and all the stress he gives us, like you said, his numbers tell the truth. Like with Luka, and, after Kyrie got here, like he was on fire. Like he was great, and we've seen
Yeah.
stretches from him where he's been the third best player on this team, sometimes the second best player on this team. Like he has it in him, and it's just
Yeah.
as a veteran guy, like it's just I don't understand how this how the season hasn't even started yet, and here we are talking about a kid, a Jason Kidd communication error, and it's confusing to me, and I'm hoping they get it sorted out, over this next week before we go into, I would hate for it to go into San Antonio and Hardaway's like, well, I don't even know if I'm sixth man or 10th man. Like, who knows?
Yeah. Yeah. And the last point to this is you really get a sense of how different corporate America is
Mm-hmm.
to athletes, professional athletes, because like corporate America, like when you're on a team, you have to know what's expected of you so
Yep.
you can perform to your best abilities. And then when you're a professional athlete, you just heard Tim Hardaway Jr. said he has a sense of his role because just from when he did play or just practice, what lineups he's playing against. Obviously, more times or not, he's not with Luca and Kyrie, so you have a sense. But professional athletes, they just always have to be ready. They're
Yep.
just ready for anything. Just if your name's called, play great. If your name's not called, you get some shots up after the game, or
Yeah,
just go home and
be a
next
good
day.
teammate, right? Like be a good teammate. Like cheer your teammates on. Don't
Exactly. Yeah.
mope on the bench. Like that matters.
And that changes the dynamic of
It
everything.
really does. Yeah, it really does.
And also, let's be honest here, he's the biggest trade chip, that the
100%.
Mavericks have. So that's another factor to it. If it's not basketball related, also, tell him, well, I'm not in the position, but if I'm Nico, I would want to tell him as well. So you have great relationships with agents and
Mhm.
players saying, hey, we are fielding offers and seeing what's available for you, but we just want to let you know this is the role that you have to start the season.
And I think
And
he knows that. Like he's talked about, like I didn't even know if I was going to be here. Like his
yeah,
name's been in trade talks for 3 years. It seems like, and I think he, you know, for the Maverick, like if you're the Mavericks, like why would you not want to get as much as you can out of him at this point, right? Like
yeah,
showcase your biggest trade asset,
you
right? Like
need it.
put him on the court.
They don't have a third or fourth option. I mean,
Yeah,
they
but like
really need
put him on the
someone.
court. Like if somebody needs a 6 man, somebody goes down middle of the season and Hardaway's contract's expiring. I mean, the contract situation is probably the biggest asset, right? Because the money comes off the books at the end of the year for whoever wants to acquire him. So it's that's a big piece of it. But if a team is needing a three a really really good 3-point shooter, like why not showcase Tim Hardaway Jr. as a guy off the bench, right? Or but like just let him know. Like I understand we're talking about like the future and what's going to happen with Hardaway, but when it comes down to it, it's like why can't you just let the guy know like, hey, this is what you're going to be. This is your role. Like I understand the concept of you've got all these new pieces in, and you're trying to mold your lineups and kind of figure things out. But this is a veteran guy that's been on your team for a while that
Yeah.
obviously has the respect of Luka and Kyrie, and I just don't understand it. It makes no sense to me.
Okay, so more to come on that situation. TBD. Shahnavaz and I will probably be talking about it a lot over the
Yep.
coming months and up until trade deadline or even into the off season. But okay, so this is what I'm excited to see what your prediction is for this team, because I've seen from various websites all the way from fourth seed to all the way down to 11th
Mm-hmm.
seed for this Mavericks team. I'll start with you because I'm still thinking on the fly, to be honest. Every
Yeah,
day,
me too.
just it's a different it's a different response on what this team will do. So Shahnavaz, I will ask you, where do you see this team finishing in the West as of today?
So, yeah, I'm kind of thinking about this on the fly, and
Yep.
I know my predictions are way off last year because I think I had the Clippers finishing first and like New
Same. I was
Orleans
off too.
third, and like I don't know, I'm so bad at predictions. So I look at the Western Conference, and you look at the teams that made the playoffs last year,
Hmm.
and kind of what did they do in the offseason to improve. So I think Denver got worse. I think losing Bruce Brown is huge for that team. Obviously, they're still going to be, I think, a top 2-3 seed. Like, I'm not, this isn't, saying they're going to miss the postseason.
Yeah.
LA, the Lakers got better. Can the Clippers stay healthy? Are they going to pull off a James Harden trade?
The Sun.
Can Zion stay healthy? Phoenix obviously got better. Well, I don't know if they got better. They're going to be a defensive liability all season.
They got
but
more talent.
They got more talent. Yeah, Memphis is missing job. But that team is loaded. With role players. The questions I have. I don't think Dallas is going to be a top 4 or 5 seed. I think if everything goes right, they could finish 5th. I think that's
Yeah.
kind of like perfect storm. Like, everything goes right, the defense gets back on track. And this team doesn't have to be the 7th best defensive team in basketball like they were a couple years ago, right? They need to be 15th, 16th, like kind of middle of the pack.
Yeah.
This team
And that would
lost
be
a
a great
lot.
improvement.
Yeah, I mean, it really would. But you look at some of the
Yeah.
losses last year, like a lot of those were last possession. A lot of those were we had the lead going in, with 2 minutes left and blew the game. Like, a lot of those losses we had last year should have been wins, or could have been wins, right? Like, with the right defensive players on the court, just rebounding an extra 2 defensive rebounds, like, would have stopped, would have stopped the team from scoring. So I think perfect storm. The Mavericks finished 5th. Right now, my gut tells me they're going to finish probably 7th, 8th. I think that's I think they're right now kind of on the cusp. And this is just being totally honest and
Just say it,
communicating what it
Shahnavaz.
is.
If that's
Like,
what you feel, just say it.
right now, my gut tells me they're going to be 7th. I think that's kind of where I'm leaning. Perfect storm, they probably finish 5th, maybe 4th. I mean, depending on injuries and things like that happen. But look, this offense was a plus 4.2 last year with Luka and Kyrie, which would have been the best plus minus in the league in terms of net rating. Like, I don't think the offense is going to be the problem. It's going to be how do the new guys fit in, right? What impact do they make defensively? The growth of Derek Lively Jr. And really, the kind of the progress of Josh Green. Like, is he going to be a core piece of this unit, the starting unit going forward? Or are you banking on Derek Jones Jr., who really offensively is not going to give you much? But we've seen him play great defense. So, long story short, I say anywhere between 5 and 7. I think that's kind of where I've got the Mavs finishing. Right now, I'll say 7th, but I think perfect storm probably 5th.
Okay. So 7th with some options, but 7th is your answer.
7th. Let's go with 7th. How about that? Let's stick with 7. That's fine.
Okay. So 7th is yours, and like you said, I'm on the fly. Like, one day, from what I've seen and what they're telling us, I think they're gonna have a great year. Then the next day, it's absolute chaos with injuries and some players not playing up to par. Just for instance, I thought Rashawn Holmes was going to make more of an impact right when he got here, and I thought Josh Green was going to solidify his starting spot, where Jason Kidd was only going to think about centers, but now he's thinking about a wing and a center. So, but from what I've seen, I think there's 4 teams at the top of the West, and I think after that, it's open for anyone.
Sure.
I think Denver, I think the Suns, I think the Lakers, and I think the Warriors are also the top 4 teams in the West. And I think anything past that, it could be up for grabs. Clippers could be 5th. It could be a spark from the Grizzlies. Like you said, the Mavericks could have best case scenario. Everything's going for them offensively. And
Sacramento, are they going to be as good as they were last year?
Sacramento, the Timberwolves, they could have a research. They could have a really great year from Anthony Edwards. He can take that next step. And Carl
Pelicans,
Anthony Towns, yeah, the Pelicans, I really don't like that
really?
chemistry. They have so many talented individual players, but I think they need a point guard. Like it's
Yeah,
the
that's true.
McCollum is. It was great for a little bit, but I don't think he's a long-term point guard. I think they need someone to set up the offense and drive to the lane, and just orchestrate that team. And from what I've seen, I know preseason, but like you said, we really don't know with these teams until December. But from what I've seen, I am going to say, hopefully everyone's healthy.
Mhm.
But from a full year perspective with Kyrie and Luca, and like you said, there were so many close games when they did play that they honestly could have made a run if they had that chemistry of who's taking the last shot,
Mhm.
how do we play together, how do we bond, we kind of just they threw us together and we have to make magic. But I think if you have a full season of those two players and then just everyone steps up defensively and makes jump shots, you can see a great season from this team. And you can see, at least like you said, middle of the pack defense. That's all you need
Mhm.
is be 15th
Right.
and with that offense. So with all things said, I am going to just be realistic.
Mhm.
And at this moment, it's on the fly. I am going to say the Mavericks will be a 7th seed.
There
I'm
you
going
go.
to agree with you. But it could be really great. It could be a really great season for this team, and they can move up to 5th, like you said. But it could also, things could, injuries. I mean, how many games are these top two stars going to play? And if they're out, it's going to be hard because right now they don't have a third option. They don't have a fourth option. And you kind of have THJ as the default, and he doesn't even know what his role is. And if they miss games, it's going to be, they could be a 9th or 10th seed, and that would be very bad for this team. So I'm going to say 7th right now. And like I said last podcast, I really truly think this is a 2-year process to get this
Mhm.
team to really succeed. They got Kyrie back, they got some defenders. I think trade deadline or off season, they're really going to catapult this team into that top 4 in the West or top 5 in the West as as a lock for contention, at least in the Western Conference. So
Yep.
7th seed from me, 7th seed from you, and it's still fluid.
It really is. And
Next week we can say 5th. Next week we can say, oh
yeah,
dang,
let's see how the
this is
season
bad.
starts. And
Yeah,
but
but
I
the
mean,
schedule looks good for them, so they could
it
start
does.
off really good.
Yeah, and you make a good point of this being a process. I mean, the Mavericks didn't really tear it down per se, like we've seen other teams like Oklahoma City did, right? I mean, they didn't. The Mavericks didn't rebuild kind of like that, but you know, when you basically have a season like the Mavericks did last year, you make the big swing for Kyrie. You
Mhm.
lose a guy that was you know somewhat the heart and soul of your team in Dorian Finney-Smith. I mean, it takes time to rebuild it. Now you get
Yeah,
younger, right? You get a guy
yeah,
like Grant Williams. You get Lively and Omax. You bring back Seth. You've still got Hardy, Green. Like you've got now the good, a good foundation, which it
yeah,
was hard to say that this team had for the last few years, right? And look, after last year, anything can happen. I mean, I'm a firm believer now of anything can happen in the playoffs. Like the run that Miami had, like just get there, just get to the postseason. Like that's really all that matters. And
yeah.
to your point, the Mavericks now have assets for trades. Right after this year, they're gonna finally have all their first round picks available. Now they're still stuck with that giving the Knicks their pick, which will probably convey this year. Fingers crossed. If it doesn't, that means the season was really bad. The Mavericks finished with another top 10 pick, but
Yeah.
um, then you've got all this ammunition to go out and who's the next disgruntled superstar, right? Like if
Mhm.
it comes to that, or is there another role player that you can get, right? Is it going to be a guy like OG Anunoby? Is it going to be a Carl Anthony Towns? Is it going to who knows, right? I mean, we never. There's
Who
always every
knows?
off season
Yeah.
somebody wants out, right? And the Mavericks are positioning themselves to be able to have the ability to make a big swing again. But you're right. Like, it's going to be a process, and anything can happen. You know, we've seen it multiple. Like, who's to say Phoenix stays healthy the entire year, right? Like,
Yeah.
you know, you've got, you know, aging guys like Durant and players with injury history like Bradley Beal and Devin Booker. Like, there's no guarantee they're going to stay healthy. Like, what Denver's, you know, is Denver going to regress? Like, can LA, you know, when is LeBron going to break down? Like, is it,
Yeah.
you know, like we saw it's kind of like Tom Brady, right? Like, we didn't see it until it actually happened, right? Like,
And how many games will Davis play? You know,
yeah, is Anthony Davis
so
going to
many
stub his toe and be out 6 months? Like, who knows, right? Like,
there's so many variables into the season. I mean, it's gonna be interesting because I mean it can click for this team if they just be average on defense and everyone makes their shots. I mean,
yeah,
so we
yeah,
don't know what's gonna happen. And honestly, I think 7th seed is really great progress for this team because if you think about the West, this is not the East. The West is
mm-hmm.
loaded.
The West is
And
completely stacked.
completely stacked. I mean, so we talked about top four, and it might be different for you, but just Denver. You have the Suns, the Lakers, and the Warriors, but then you have Clippers, and you also have the Kings who played great last season. You
Mm-hmm.
have the Timberwolves. You have the Grizzlies, who honestly I think Grizzlies and Mavericks are on par with each other if both rosters are fully healthy.
Mm-hmm.
Just how deep Grizzlies are and top heavy the Mavs are, but they honestly could be a couple games apiece from each other, and one gets the 6th seed, one gets the 7th seed. So it's not
Was it
a
last year?
bad
Like,
thing.
last year was what? Like, the difference between 3rd seed and 10th seed was like 3 games or something like that. Like,
Yeah,
at the
so
end
it's
of the
not a
year.
bad thing. Yeah,
Yeah,
just
and you know, it's. I mean, you're right. I mean, it's such a crapshoot. Like, the West is completely stacked, you know, this year, and it's just you know, I think the Mavericks also in some ways have a chip on their shoulder because I think no one is giving this team any credit for what they did in the offseason. Like, you know, I always
yeah,
bash on national media because of their Dallas hate, but it's getting to the point now where it's literally just Kyrie hate. Like, it's literally like, oh, the Mavericks have Kyrie Irving, like they're gonna make they're not gonna make the playoffs because of
yeah,
him. Like,
yeah,
oh, the Mavericks have Kyrie Irving, like when is he gonna ask? They're already starting with when is he gonna ask to be traded to the Lakers? Like, the
yeah,
season hasn't started yet, and now you're bringing this back up. Like, you've got more exposure to him than a lot of people. And just watching his interviews and like the clips that we've posted, you know, on Twitter and stuff, like he genuinely seems happy for the first time in a long time, like, and humble and like at peace with where he is. And I think
yeah.
that's going to play a big part of it. You know, I think you're going to see a more energized Luka. You know, I think a Luka with his chip on his shoulder as well after what happened last year. You know, nobody's giving this team any credit. So if this team catches fire, you know, who's to say that they don't finish with a top 4 seed? Like, anything is
They
possible.
could.
Anything is possible.
Anything is
Anything is
possible.
possible. But I think 7 is realistic right now where the Mavericks are
Right now, yeah.
with the roster they have, the way that the Western Conference is stacked, and 7th isn't bad. Like, people think like, oh man, like 7th seed in the West. Like, no, but the West is so loaded that like it's exactly like you said, it's not 7th in the East. Like, this isn't like a 39 win team getting 7th seed in the East, right? Like, there's no way. Like, every team in that playoff range in the West is going to be over 500. Like, and it could be way over 500, right? Like,
Exactly, yeah.
so it's going to be interesting to see. I think 7 is realistic for now, and who knows, right? If this team catches fire, then watch out.
Yeah, and 7th seed could be the 10th overall seed in the whole
Right.
NBA. So okay, so that's that's our predictions for today. October 20th. Let's see how they do tonight.
Yeah.
And
Let's see.
I mean, I'm excited to see how they play and just excited to see them in person, but just how many minutes will Kyrie get? Just how aggressive will Josh Green play, like you mentioned at the beginning of this podcast, and just how they play defensively, because the Pistons, they have a lot of young cats and they are athletic as hell. So just defensively, how did the Mavericks combat the Pistons' youth and also athleticism? And hopefully most of the players play, because I want to see Cade I want to see
Yeah,
Jaden Ivey. I want to see the Thompson kid. I want to
Jalen
see
Duren. Like
Duran.
Pistons are
There's a
good
lot of
young.
dang.
Yeah, they got a good core.
Who's okay? We'll end with this. Outside of the Mavericks, what is one team you're excited to watch over the course of the season?
OKC. That
Okay.
team excites me. That team is so like the way they've rebuilt that team and the pieces they have. I want to see Chet. Like I hope Chet can stay healthy.
Yeah.
I love Shea. I think Shea is awesome. Josh Giddey at the time when he was picked, I was like, who the hell is this guy? And now he's like one of the best, on ball
Ozzy,
defenders.
Ozzy, Ozzy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he's fantastic. I think they're going to be a fun team to watch.
Okay. I'm gonna go with the Orlando Magic. I
Nice.
really like the Orlando Magic, and I root for Mosley.
Of
But
course. Yeah.
I just like the youth on the teams. They're kind of like the Pistons. Like, okay, when are y'all going to start winning?
Yeah.
Y'all have all these first round picks. I mean, Anthony Black and their other first round pick, Jet Howard,
Mhm.
they're top 11 picks, and they might not even play that much. I mean, that's
Yeah.
how loaded that team is. Either trade them all for a star, or finally start winning, or get a couple veterans just to. I mean, they have Joe Ingles, but get a couple veterans to make this team really push for a lower end playoff team, not just play in. Just
Yeah.
go for a 7th or 8th seed in the East. But I'm excited to see that team. You're excited to see OKC, but obviously the Mavericks is the main front for this team. So we'll see how they do tonight, and hopefully next week we have some good news because they do play the Spurs in their season opener, and then they come home and the return of Dorian Finney-Smith.
Yep.
So we'll only have one game to talk about, but we'll definitely analyze over the course of the week what is going on with this team. So Shahnavaz, as always, I appreciate you, brother, and we will
Thanks, bud.
talk soon.